approximately forever.
We cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
Please continue to hold for the next available representative.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
We appreciate you waiting and waiting. What is it you're waiting for? Do you even know anymore?
These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
Disconnected.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new live stream. It's good to be with you guys on a Tuesday, end of the month, end of April. It is going to be our end of the month stream. It's good to be right on time, and we're going to put the camera on right about now. So there we go. I am here. I am alive. And on top of that, we are ready to go. And we have new polls to go over. We went over some polling in the last live stream. This live stream, here's the agenda. First of all, we're going to be going over the polls. Second of all, we are going to be going over the this new 13 Keys drama. I did a video on it earlier today, but why exactly the method is flawed, why Lichtman is just going insane, losing his mind, and why the historical, track record of it doesn't necessarily add up in this current day and age for the state of affairs this election cycle. Why is it flawed? What's different now? Why are the keys being interpreted subjectively? Then we're going to go over Biden's problem in Michigan. We have a new article that was written about the Arab American community turning on Joe Biden. We're going to be going over that. Then we're going to be getting to super chats. So probably about 10 minutes each segment, but feel free to send in the super chats now so you make sure they get read later on during the stream. So we have to talk about this. We have to cover this. Let's see, how many people do we have in chat? We have about 300. So we'll people will pour in, I'm sure, throughout the next few minutes or so. But we have new polling out of The Hill, out of Emerson. And these polls are showing that Donald Trump is leading every single swing state. He's not just leading in a couple of them. He's not just leading in one, and he's just trailing a little bit in the rest of them, like what the polls showed in 2020. The polls in 2020 underestimating Trump. This time around, Donald Trump with a lead in Arizona. 4 percentage point lead for Donald Trump. 3-point lead for Trump in Georgia. 1-point lead for him in Michigan. 1-point lead in Nevada. 5-point lead in North Carolina. And they have Mark Robinson winning as well, which a lot of polls have showed him losing ground. They still have him up by 1, so maybe a 4-point split might be what we're looking at in that race. And also Trump up by 2 in Pennsylvania, Trump up by 2 in Wisconsin. Trump goes up by more in most states when they factor in RFK Jr., Cornel West, Jill Stein. Seems like Trump goes up in every single swing state. I think Michigan, he doesn't move. Arizona, he doesn't move. But still, some of the polls we saw that had RFK Jr. hurting Trump might be a thing of the past. And then we have polls in the Senate races as well that are important, which you have, Democrats leading all of them. But the main takeaway from this is that these states are still razor thin. None of these are anticipated pickups, and a lot of the undecided voters are backing Trump, which kind of tells you that, maybe Kari Lake's not really in a bad position if she's down 2 in the polls. Slotkin and Rogers, they're neck and neck. If Donald Trump wins Michigan, that's an open seat. That likely does flip. Nevada's Senate race, the spread is 8 points, which, Trump is leading in Nevada by 5 points. In the multi-candidate race, he's leading by 1. I don't think you're going to see a 9-point split. I think a lot of that is just lower name recognition. Some other polls have it closer, but the fact you have an incumbent Democrat at 45%, that's still not a good sign. You can still win. We look at CCM in those polls we saw back in 2022, but still, if you're an incumbent starting off polling at 45, you are vulnerable. Absolutely, you're vulnerable, especially in a presidential year where there's less focus on, candidates down ballot. Also, Bob Casey, he's only up by 4. Bob Casey, the electoral juggernaut in Pennsylvania, he's only at 46, so that shows a 6-point split. Now, McCormick, is he really all that capable of victory? I maintain that he's probably not, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It absolutely will be. And then you have Tammy Baldwin, the supposedly unbeatable Tammy Baldwin, only up by 3 points over Eric Hovde. That's not a very good sign for Tammy Baldwin, especially because Hovde is a very strong candidate. He is self-funding, and it's going to be very difficult to kind of lower his position. If he's only down 3 right now, and Trump is winning Wisconsin by 2 in the polls, that's a very, very good sign for Eric Hovde to go out there and possibly pick off that Senate seat. And he's a uniquely strong candidate, but the question is it going to be enough to beat an incumbent with deep pockets named Tammy Baldwin? I'm not entirely sure that it is, but it's going to be a very close race, and he is a very strong candidate, and already he's in a good position for, being, 6 months away from the election. He's already starting off in a strong position, stronger than I think a lot of people initially expected, because you come in with lower name ID, but you're still polling well. That's a very good sign. Now, in terms of the general election, we've had more polls, and you look at this, Donald Trump up in every single poll in the aggregate except for 1. Now he leads by 1.4. Remember when he was up by 2, and then it went to, kind of like a dead heat, but Trump was still leading? And, they said that was a Biden surge. Is this not a Trump surge? Honestly, I don't think a whole lot has changed, but Biden's numbers do keep going down. Trump, despite being outspent ridiculously, is holding his own, and he's on trial. That's kind of a very, very good position for Trump to be in right now. Now, 6 months to go, that's entirely true. We're not quite there yet. Conventions, however, we're less than 3 months to the RNC. We're a little bit less than 4 months to the DNC. So already you're in a position where you are, very much in a good shape to go out there and win this thing. And you've never been the favorite before, and you're the favorite now despite everything they're throwing at you. that does speak volumes about the strength of Donald Trump. And if anything, you could talk about the backfire, because they will say, well, this is not going to help him win independence if he gets convicted or whatever. Well, here's the problem. You look at this, and here's what the polls show. Now, in some states, they say that the trial is appropriate to hold Trump accountable, even though it's not a majority in most of these states. There's a comparable percentage that say the trial is a witch hunt. But still, those are two very, extremes. You could say this trial is political theater instead of putting the rule of law. And what that really does, you look at those polls and only 35% say it's about the rule of law. But this poll kind of asks a leading question. But even then, it's not enough, because witch hunt, it is a witch hunt. But people, A, may not know what the term witch hunt means that are being polled, which explains the unsure. And B, that's kind of strong language. And then the other one is like, it's appropriate for accountability, whatever. But still, it gets better for Donald Trump when you look at this, because the polls show that in every single swing state, it makes people more likely to support Trump for president instead of making him less likely if he's found guilty. So it makes people more likely to support Trump if Donald Trump is found guilty in this trial, a criminal trial, than if he is not found guilty. Now, here's the deal, because people will say, well, that's just his base. It's only 33% say it's going to make people more likely to support him. What about independent voters? Now, in every single potential poll here, you look at Arizona, every state, by a margin of 7%. Independents, not Republicans, not Democrats, independents, by a 7% margin say it makes people more likely to support him in Arizona. Georgia, 6 points. Michigan down by 4. North Carolina, positive margin of 7. Nevada, negative margin of 7. Pennsylvania, positive margin of 7. And Wisconsin, negative margin of 6. So you add it all up, you divide it up, it's about even among independents. If not, in some places, it's possibly helping Donald Trump among independent voters, because, I don't know, maybe it's because they want to continue to fight the establishment, even if they happen to be an independent, and maybe they thought that Trump's first term was not exactly, up to par by those standards, and now they're seeing the fact that he's, being a target of the current regime that they are disillusioned with, the regime that they don't like, and now they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, now this is a very, very good thing for Donald Trump, or in terms of their ability to perceive Donald Trump, because now they kind of resonate with the whole martyr thing. That's what every poll, for the most part, that we've seen recently is showing. And Democrats overplayed their hand, and they also died on the hill of the weakest trial of the 4 very weak trials. So already you're taking a look at this. Donald Trump is gaining among independent voters and possibly could gain more support in some states that are crucial, states he needs to win. If he gets convicted, it might help him. They're playing with fire. Who knows what's exactly going to happen? We've got a very long way to go. But when you want to look at the polls, they look good, but still you have some people who will continuously go out there and say that it doesn't matter, none of the polls matter, and one of those people is Professor Alan Lichtman, creator of the 13 Keys method, which has been historically accurate, but it is overrated for numerous reasons. You look at 2000, when the model was wrong, he had to change the model and said, oh, it's the popular vote, and then vice versa after 2016. You apply it historically, 1932, it would have Herbert Hoover winning by a lot when he got trounced in a landslide. Back in the 1890s, ironically, the last election where a major party nominee was the nominee when he already served as a president of that party. You saw the election there go down the wire, but you saw Grover Cleveland win, and that's what Donald Trump right now is trying to do. So I think it's important that we do talk about this model, because Lichtman is now saying, and I covered this in my recent video, but I'll reiterate it on the live stream just to possibly get some people in the mix, see what you guys have to say about it. But looking at these 13 keys in the method, here's the problem with them. because Lichtman credits Biden with achieving major policy change. In part of that is the executive orders that Donald Trump signed into law that Joe Biden got rid of, which, again, that wasn't enough to get Trump the key. He had to, pass a piece of legislation, but just reversing executive orders is enough. I mean, every single president does that. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that is going to be sufficient to give Joe Biden that key, because it's just not true. He hasn't really enacted much of a policy change. And the one that he has enacted in terms of those executive orders, he ripped up basically Trump's border policy. And that caused the border crisis, which is a big reason why his approval rating is below 40%. And he's got 6 months to go, and he's not taking action on fixing it. On immigration, he's down 30 points. None of that gets taken into account regarding the 13 keys. They're not taking it into account. Then they talk about the economy, because the keys say, and we could look at this right here, or maybe it's in here. Okay, here we go. The short-term economy. Oh, we're technically not in a recession, but still, polls show close to a majority of Americans believe that they are in a recession, and recession doesn't really have, the entire bearing of the economy. Like Lichtman said that Donald Trump lost the economy key in 2020, or both economy keys, which again, it is true that COVID kind of neutralized the issue, but it was still a winning issue for Donald Trump. Look at the exit polls. COVID was a big issue that the keys cannot account for aside from the economy, which still voters gave credit to Trump on the pre-COVID economy for the most part. But you look at COVID, he couldn't predict it. So you look at that and then potentially other things. There were a lot of changes to election laws and a lot of shady stuff going on that Lichtman couldn't account for. But he's not going to account for that because we already know what side he's on. He's a supporter of Biden, wanted Trump impeached for no reason in March of 2017. And on top of that, he believes that Donald Trump should have been thrown off the ballot in the Colorado case. He thinks the Supreme Court ruled wrong on that case, that I believe he predicted Donald Trump to lose. And on top of that, he believes in abolishing the Second Amendment. So this is the guy you're dealing with in a hyper-polarized climate. Whether he thought that Donald Trump would win in 2016 is irrelevant. He said Trump will win and then get impeached and removed from office, and that never happened. And that's a big portion of the pie of his prediction then, and it didn't even come true. So what's there to believe that it's going to come true now? Is a whole nother thing, because like I've said, in terms of the keys with the economy, they don't add up, because, real per capita growth is better than the last term. Okay, well, the last term you had something called COVID. In this term, you have something called, COVID goes away and then, slowly the economy reopens. No thanks to Joe Biden. People don't like the way Biden's handled the economy. So how exactly is that key going to go in Joe Biden's favor? It's just nonsense. It's complete nonsense. It's just saying, this is what people are going to vote on, these things that they don't even understand, things that they don't feel. If you think that, Trump is going to end up going down because Democrats turn out better, or, maybe they'll find a way to scare their base out, fine. Maybe you want to predict Biden winning. You can maybe try to rationalize it. I've even said that we have to rationalize it. Otherwise, we're not going to take this election seriously, and it's going to happen, and he will get reelected. There won't be a country anymore. But when it comes down to the Lichtman model, it's just so much nonsense. Saying that a third-party candidate winning at least 5% of the popular vote is going to hurt Biden. Now, that might have been true in 92, but in 96, it wasn't true. Ross Perot got 8% of the vote, but he took more votes away from Dole. So where are you taking votes away from? That's a real question. And all the third-party candidates combined likely are going to get at least 5% of the popular vote, or at least close to it. But Lichtman is not taking that into consideration either, because, like I said, he's being a political hack. On top of that, you look at the whole scandal key, and Biden has no scandal, he says. Biden did not have a foreign policy failure, despite the fact that our foreign policy as a whole is a failure. Afghanistan was a disaster. Biden's approval rating never recovered from it. And on top of that, you look at what's going on overseas. There's no successes. Biden does not have charisma. I understand why he doesn't give Trump the charisma key, because it's not necessarily about base appeal more so than to independence, whatever you name it. But either way, these are arbitrary rules. They have largely been accurate, sometimes due to coincidence more so than not, hence why he keeps changing the rules. But it feels like he's twisting and turning the rules that are already arbitrary to give Biden a win. Now, you could argue the keys are obsolete just based off of the fact that this is 2024. These keys were created back in the 1980s, and they predicted elections correctly from like 1936 and on. And you could point to certain reasons for why they were able to go out there and do that, but still, it doesn't tell us the full story. It doesn't tell us everything that's going on. It doesn't tell us how people feel. Approval rating does, and that's the number one indicator for an incumbent president's vote share. Now, Biden might get higher than 40% of the vote just because a lot of people will vote against Donald Trump, but Trump has a better favorable rating than Biden, and it kind of shows that as an incumbent president, it's usually a referendum on the incumbent, but also, Trump is in a unique position because it's a referendum on which president did you prefer. And a majority of Americans consistently are polled that they think the Trump administration was better than the Biden administration. Biden's going to try to scare people into saying, well, actually, Trump's first term wasn't bad all of a sudden, and my election last time was basically won on lies. But either way, they're going to say, oh, Trump's next term is going to be scary, which, again, is that really going to move the needle for a lot of people? The base, he's going to get his base to turn out. Obviously, there's never been a debate that a good share of Democrats, mindless NPCs, are going to vote for Biden. There's never been any disagreement. It's going to be an election that's going to be closer than it needs to be. It will be. But at the end of the day, it doesn't exactly, come down to a set of keys that don't tell you the full story about the economy, don't take the border into account whatsoever. Because people liked Trump on the economy in 2020, but they didn't like it, on COVID. That's a whole other situation. There's no COVID key. But the economy keys, you want to say he used those as COVID keys, then you also have to use them as COVID keys now, where the economy only recovered due to COVID, and people don't see the economy as being in good shape, and that doesn't take into account the border. So you got to give at least those keys if you want to interpret them properly. The border crisis is a scandal. You've had foreign or military failures. You've had no foreign or military successes. You don't have a charismatic incumbent. Already you're talking about being down, 3 keys? Then you talk about the economy keys. That's 5. Scandal, that's 6 as well. And when you look at the party mandate, that's already out the window. At least Lichtman will agree with that. So already there's enough keys, and then some, if you want to interpret them that way, to say that Joe Biden is not going to win re-election, but Lichtman is not going to interpret them very well either way. Like I said, it's a guide. It's a general guide. Yeah, if the economy's doing well, usually the incumbent president gets reelected, and those 2 or those 3 keys all are tied together. But the problem is that that's not exactly how Americans view the economy. It's not how Americans view Biden as somebody who's free from scandal. His personal favorables are just as low now as his approval rating, which is also very important. So just looking at that, it's not a good look for Biden. The keys are a cope. Now, Biden might win, but even if he wins, it's not going to be because of the keys. It's going to be because of other things. Now, he's not guaranteed to win. He's not, I would say, not even the favorite, which kind of makes the interpretation of the keys a little bit more interesting at the very least, and they very well could end up being wrong. But when you try to interpret these things like this, a lot of it is just from a perspective of somebody who is objectively a political hack that can't admit they're a political hack. Because, I'm biased. I admit my bias. He's not exactly all that, biased. Even then, when he said Trump would win, he said Trump's going to be impeached, which, again, who knows why he picked Trump to win. Maybe it was because he couldn't twist the keys in favor of Hillary, because he couldn't. Maybe it was because of the fact that, when it comes down to it, he wanted some media press, and that's exactly what he's getting right now, because everybody's, saying Trump's the favorite. Now he's coming out doing the same thing. Who knows? All I'm saying is the keys are very arbitrary, and they're not the be-all and end-all. polls are probably, even though they're flawed, a better indicator usually. Now, there's other factors to take into account, but the factors you take into account aren't some like economic growth compared to past presidencies. It's more so, how's the state of the economy in the eyes of the average voter? And as of right now, the average voter's view of the economy is that it's very negative, and it's gotten worse for them actually compared to whenever Biden took office, where you actually had a higher like unemployment rate, things like that. And that's not a good sign for Biden. So the keys are kind of a crutch. There's so many things at play. Technically, you could say if you want to apply a usual midterm model that's historically accurate up until 2022, it would have backfired because there's so many other factors. And we were kind of stunned at the result of the midterms. But now looking back at it, it kind of sort of made sense in a way that you can even say that Donald Trump's going to outperform a lot of Republicans in some places when he's on the ballot this fall. So that's that. The keys, very overrated, that we know. Now, I do want to touch base on this article from Slate, because Biden is really struggling in these Rust Belt states. And we could talk about the polls as well, but you look at the polls everywhere now. This is not just in, what we see in terms of the general election or certain swing states. These are every single swing state. Pennsylvania now has turned on its head. This was Biden's strongest state. Donald Trump now leads by 1 point. He's polling at 48%. And the polls in the aggregate, none of these are Republican-leaning internals. Maybe you could say Emerson is like the most right-leaning one. They were kind of the outlier in 2022 to a certain extent of the major pollsters. But Fox News, they were accurate in 2022 with their final Pennsylvania poll. Just because it's Fox News does not make the poll right-leaning. It's not. Then CBS News, which YouGov, CBS, they were on point, at least nationally, in 2022 in a lot of swing states in their final polls. They have Trump winning Pennsylvania. He's at 50% of the vote. If you hit 50 in the aggregate, you're in a very good position. Obviously, things can change. You can go down. You can go back up. You name it. But still, the fact that Trump is in the driver's seat, Biden never polled at 50, to my knowledge, except for actually even in the Franklin and Marshall poll, he never polled above 50%. So you're seeing that in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is in a good position. I mean, that's really good for him right now. Arizona, he's up by 5. This is Arizona we're talking about. A lot of Republicans even still aren't bullish despite the polling, but you're looking at it, same polls in the mix. Trump is gaining. He went from a 3-point lead to a 5-point lead. And the last 2 polls were conducted after the abortion ruling. And there's still internal polls out there that Trump released that obviously are not included in the aggregate, but they still show him leading. So this is a good sign for Trump that he's up by 5 in Arizona. That margin, if he gets 49, just given the third-party candidates, that means he's probably going to win. You talk about, some of the suburbs have moved left, but a lot of Hispanic voters moving right, possibly Trump again, presidential year. He could do even better. Who knows what's going to happen on that front? But the border crisis is there. It's a border state. Nevada is basically a border state, even though it's technically not in the southern border. And Donald Trump leads Joe Biden by almost 5 percentage points in Nevada. Now, Nevada does have a tendency to underestimate Democrats in polls, but presidential years, it's never underestimated Trump by that much. I think the first time was like a 2 to 3 point polling error. They were on point in 2020. They were on point until early voting started in 2022. So the fact that he's up by 4 in Nevada, that's a good sign. He doesn't need to win it by 4. He probably wins it by 1 to 2. Republicans haven't won it since 2004, but he's in a very good position. But you talk about the Rust Belt, Michigan, he's up by 1.2. That actually has narrowed. Now, maybe it's a methodology thing. I don't know exactly why it's narrowed. CBS News, they never released a poll. Morning Consult, Trump dipped in the Michigan poll, but he went up everywhere else. Maybe the polls were overestimating him before in Michigan. Now they're maybe underestimating him, or at least he's polling in line with the other states. Because, it's still redder than Pennsylvania, which wouldn't be insane to see, but it's not as red as Wisconsin, which polls there had Hillary up by 10 this day in history. Biden The early polls in Wisconsin were more accurate than the later polls, but Biden was up by like 11 with a couple weeks to go. That's where you saw the Trump losing by 17 poll, which was off by like 17 points. So looking at this, Trump up by 1.8% in Wisconsin, the Rust Belt states. We have to talk about Michigan because everyone's talking about the conflict, Israel, Palestine. They're at each other's throats. You have the 10/7 incident, which was like comparable in many people's eyes to 9/11. And then they're striking back and they are hitting Palestine, trying to target Hamas. And this is kind of ripping the Democrat base in two. We talk about the fact that Democrats, they were united in 2020, common goal, COVID, high turnout, BLM, Blumph bad, you name it. That coalition is very unstable. They're losing Hispanics. They're not energizing blacks. And on top of that, they're losing Arab voters because of it. And honestly, they're probably losing some voters on the other side of the conflict as well. Maybe not as many because Republicans have always been pro-Israel, but they haven't really done that well with the Jewish vote outside of the Orthodox Jewish vote, which Trump did extremely well with. And they also care the most about Israel compared to the other segment of the Jewish vote, which, the younger polls actually show a majority of Jewish voters under the age of 29 support Palestine over Israel, which is kind of a change of pace. But still, that's beside the point. The main point is that Biden is losing both sides of the argument. He's not doing well with either side. He's losing all portions of his base. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he's also kind of playing both sides in a way, because he's like, yeah, we need to get this over with. We don't want people to die. But people on both sides, I think, know and understand that Trump is somebody who deeply cares about diplomacy, ending conflicts, getting things done, getting things resolved. And they know that the 10/7, none of this stuff would have happened under Trump. Even the Russia-Ukraine invasion likely would not have happened under Trump. The botched Afghanistan withdrawal would not have happened under Trump. China might go for Taiwan next. Who knows what's going to happen on that front? Would definitely not happen under Trump. They get mad at Trump because he's friendly or he talks positively about certain world leaders you're not supposed to talk positively about, like Putin, like Kim Jong-un, like, even he says certain things like he's like, we can't, Hezbollah is smart. These groups are smart. The Taliban, he's not exactly going to critique their intelligence or underestimate them, despite the fact that he doesn't like them. But what it shows is that he understands business. He understands how to settle these things. And that's why his foreign policy was so intelligent, because he understood the art of the deal. Now, it's not to say that there weren't bumps in the road or that everything was perfect. And it is true that the Pentagon is partially responsible for lying about troop levels and possibly kept us in some conflicts longer than we needed to be in. But I think that we know this now. Trump is not learning on the job anymore. He already basically worked the job, and the recent interview or something that he said that his biggest regret was being too nice. And I think that that's a very good thing to hear, because at times he was a little too nice, and you're probably a little bit naive when you're in that situation, because you have to merge the business mindset with the whole political mindset and understand that the establishment is not going to fully cave into your demands. You have to fully go out there and just crush and drain the swamp completely, not try to work within it. But still, a lot of voters understand this. A lot of Muslims live in Wayne County, Michigan. Probably around 100,000 do. And it's not just Muslims, because people will say, oh, well, the Arab vote will doom Biden single-handedly. No, that's not entirely true. They're not the biggest portion of the population. But everything adds up. And white young progressives, so-called progressives, the far left people, these people are also very angry at Biden. They're calling him Genocide Joe. They are occupying college campuses. Trump is saying, stop the protests. Personally, Democrat infighting, which is largely what this is. Democrats mad at Biden. Is this exactly something that needs to be stopped, so long as it's peaceful and not exactly impacting certain people's lives, whatever you name it? Like, we need to just, whatever makes the whole ordeal make Biden look worse, that's what I support, because this country can't take 4 more years of this lunatic, this clown. So you're looking at this and you're talking about the Arab community, which is not just Muslims. There's a lot of Christian Arabs as well. You're Lebanese, you're Assyrian, you're Chaldean, you're plenty of other groups that are actually a majority of Arabs that live in America are actually Christian, and they've been moving right as well. But still, this is definitely going to accelerate things just because of the conflict. And you have people saying, yeah, well, they ask about, Trump wanted to ban Muslims, and they're like, a ban is better than a genocide or whatever, which obviously that's hyperbolic. Doesn't necessarily mean I agree with the way they're viewing the conflict. But still, the fact that people view it this way is not a good sign for Biden. It's a horrible sign for Biden. And he's not able to placate these people. Even if he talks out of one side of his mouth one day, he'll talk out of the other side. He can't play both sides. He can't placate them. Both sides of the conflict are not happy with how he's handled it. Meanwhile, Donald Trump can effectively go out there and play both sides, and this frustrates them because Donald Trump understands how to end conflicts. He understands how to conduct business. Joe Biden, on the other hand, doesn't know what day it is. He doesn't know what month it is, probably. He half the time probably forgets there's an election going on. We know how Joe Biden operates. So looking at that, he's just trying to placate both sides of the conflict. It's not making him look good, and it's something that is causing a lot of Muslim voters to turn on him. Some are going to vote for Trump. Some in this article voted for Trump. Some talk about people staying home. Either way, if somebody voted for Biden, then votes for Trump, that's 2 votes for Trump in Michigan. If somebody stays home, that's still a net 1 vote for Trump in the state of Michigan, because that's how these elections work. Black voters in Georgia are going to elect Trump in Georgia. Why? Are they going to vote for him? I mean, some might, but it's largely going to be because turnout, because people are not enthused with both options, meaning a lot of people stay home. That's why Trump is polling very well in Georgia, including among likely voters. He probably does gain some with black voters here and there, but it's mainly going to come from people dropping off more so than him gaining. But I think in this conflict, Dearborn, yeah, he might gain. 10-point shift in Wayne County, it's possible, especially with Detroit. You're not going to see black turnout higher than it was in 2008 like you saw in 2020. You're not going to see that. And Democrats are reaching their ceiling in Wayne County anyways. You might see a 10-point shift in favor of Trump. He might get mid-30s. And there's a lot of white working class voters in the auto industry there too who also happen to be more receptive to Trump. So it's a coalition that Biden has in Michigan that's not stable in many regards, even part of the white coalition that's just like independent voters. The EV mandates are crushing Metro Detroit and would crush Metro Detroit if they're allowed to continue, and the voters see it that way. So regardless of whatever side of the conflict people are on, they're upset, but this is something that is desperately going to hurt Biden in Michigan. He lost certain cities to the uncommitted option in the primary. Now, the primary is only one little aspect. We lost 100,000 votes. That's crazy, people will say. But what about the voters he lost that didn't show up in the primary, or the voters he lost since the primary? Because he's not rectifying his position in the eyes of a lot of these voters. In fact, he's losing more and more support. And that's how these things work in ecosystems. Trump will gain in suburban Florida, despite not gaining in suburban other places, because more people are moving there, but also they talk, they communicate, they have conversations, they sway voters. When it comes down to this, it's the same thing. It's a domino effect. Person who was going to vote for Biden in April or may not be end up voting for him in September. And it can happen vice versa as well. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. People change their votes all the time. But in a state like Michigan that is so crucial for Donald Trump and Joe Biden to win, if Donald Trump wins Michigan and Georgia, he's already likely got Nevada. I think the election's game over. So there's so many paths for Trump. But this is just one more path for Trump, and this is helping. It's not the only thing that's helping, but Democrats are really counting on college towns to bail them out. That's why they're talking about abortion, but it's not working. Biden's worst performing counties in many cases are, talk about Center, Pennsylvania, he lost a great deal of support to write-ins in the primary there. Pennsylvania is not really run by college towns. Wisconsin has a lot of them. You talk about Eau Claire, La Crosse, you talk about Dane County, that's a big one. Now, he's still going to get a ridiculous share of the vote because it's TDS-ridden Madison, very high propensity county. But if Biden can't really gain in Madison, he's really going to struggle to offset any other sort of gains that Trump probably makes in rural Wisconsin or some other part of the state. And Biden's really going to struggle. But Michigan, that's key. Democrat strongholds. It's not just Detroit, because you're struggling among black voters. Not good for Detroit. Not good for Flint, Saginaw, Lansing, or a lot of these other places. Not good for Oakland County either. There's a growing suburban black population there. But you talk about losing with Muslims in Dearborn, but the young vote, that is crucial. You talk about, East Lansing or just, Ingham County. You talk about Kalamazoo. You talk about Washtenaw. Democrats need big margins in those places to win Michigan, and they usually get them. But if they're not going to get them this time, then it's pretty much game over. A lot of young people that were like Bernie or bust, because obviously some of the Bernie supporters in 2016 voted for Biden. But you're kind of seeing the Bernie or bust crowd. A lot of those people are the uncommitteds. And a lot of them did vote for Biden in 2020, may have not voted for him in 2016. That's probably, or voted for Democrats in 2016. That's a very likely group to see a turnout drop off with, and it's good for Donald Trump. Let them keep. I hope they keep, talking about this. I hope the divide continues. I hope that, who knows what's going to happen to the convention? Who knows? Some people are saying it's going to be comparable to conventions in years past in the city of Chicago, where it's going to be taking place again. Who knows what's going to happen there? Also, it's not just the foreign policy issue, it's immigration in Chicago. You're seeing what's happening in the big cities. That's why New York probably is going to move right. It's why Chicago and Illinois, as a result, is going to move right. It's the big cities. They're the ones that have to bear the brunt of the border crisis. And everybody does, technically. But still, you're seeing a shift, and Donald Trump is in a very, very good position right now to go out there and win. So without further ado, we have to get to super chats. I'm sure we have a decent amount of them, and that we do. So we have 728 people in the live chat. Make sure you guys like the stream down below. We're only at 292 likes. Make sure you like the stream. Let's get it up there. But we have a lot of super chats to get to. Johnny Heartdog says, with the election still 6 months away, do you think that it'll be too late for America, or will it be too late to make America great again? I don't know. Well, look, we've survived the past 18 months. I guess you could go all the way back, and you could talk about the fact that it's been almost 3.5 years since Biden took office. We've survived it. I think we can probably survive it, enough of what's left. I mean, this is a slow decline, but a lot of people are waking up, which is a good thing. Cameron Campbell says, pray for our Jewish brothers and sisters. What's happening on the campuses is unacceptable and un-American. Apex Caliber says, if Trump pulls a miracle in New York, New Jersey follows. Probably, but I don't believe he's going to pull a miracle in New York. It's not just the city. It's also upstate. Upstate is not as red as you think. It doesn't vote the way that rural Pennsylvania votes. It doesn't vote the way that rural Texas votes. It votes the way, kind of a mix between northeastern Pennsylvania and you look at, rural New England, which is not exactly a very strong suit for Republicans usually. Apex Caliber says progress report for current RNC voting operation. I don't have a progress report for it. I think we'll probably hear about it in the coming months. Honestly, so long as it exists, do we have to hear about it nonstop? It's something that hopefully we have in store, but we don't want to necessarily advertise to the enemy that we're going to be on their level. Let them be a little complacent, if you know what I mean. So T-Birder V8 says, what do you think of Brandon Herrera versus the Rhino? I hope he wins. I'm not necessarily the most hopeful that he's going to pull it off because of all the money that's already poured in at the last minute for Gonzalez. Same thing goes for Dade Phelan in the state of Texas. The Speaker of the House is a Rhino. He's outspending his opponent like 30-1. It's insane what's going on there. So I hope that the incumbents get knocked off because they're Rhinos, but will they? I don't know. People just need to get out and vote. It's I'm not going to sit here and just wish cast and say it's going to happen, because we've seen this. We've been burned many times, but there is a chance. I'm not going to say there's no chance because there is. So Olivia Williams says if Lake loses, she should run for Gosar's seat. I don't know. We'll see what happens this election cycle. We'll see. It's very difficult to lose 2 statewide elections and then, well, John James did it, so maybe, but I have no idea. John Waffle H2P says, we have a slight chance of winning New York after tonight. Yeah, we don't have a like, honestly, the whole special election thing, I don't think Republicans overperformed at all, but I said this. It's like you're going to have like 60,000 people showing up. The Democrats are outspending their Republicans like a ridiculous amount in that race. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference whatsoever. Democrats, I think, yeah, they won it by, 37 points so far. Even if that margin narrows with what's left, it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us that, oh, Republicans can't win New York, because this is not really a place where Republicans have been overperforming, but it just doesn't tell us much because of the turnout level. That margin come November is definitely going to narrow, possibly to like D plus 20 from D plus 38. These special elections, yeah, Democrats, they tend to vote by mail. They tend to vote more. They've been spending more money on these races. That's why they're overperforming. I could point to you 5, 10, 15 races that are special elections where Republicans overperform, but people just will ignore those and try to act like it only matters when Democrats do it. It just, in reality, doesn't. You have some guy named Tim Kennedy, which is, again, an aristocratic name in New York. I don't think he's related, running up against Gary Dixon, not Dixon, but Dickon, like the son of a penis. Like, yeah, oh, well, Republicans lost this election where, 60,000 people turned out for. Who cares? Doesn't matter, doesn't have an impact, was never going to flip to begin with. So let them have their moment of glory, and we can have ours when it actually matters, hopefully. So there's that. Let's see. Olivia Williams says, are you going to Game 5 for the Stars and Golden Knights? I am not going to. I went to Game 3, but I'm not going to be at Game 5. Cool Blue 71 says, or at Game 2 it was, not Game 3. Alan Lichtman plus Larry Sabato equals owned by the Dem elites. I mean, yeah, technically true. I mean, they are, to a large degree, Dem elites anyways. Joins Johnson says, there's a lot of talk about VP, but if Trump wants to win, picking Tulsi is an instant win, and he takes all the swing states, it's unbeatable. Well, I'm kind of curious what the logic is behind it, because I always feel like Tulsi Gabbard is somebody who is a wild card pick. Yes, she has intriguing qualities. She's good on foreign policy. But again, would she alienate a lot of donors because of it? You got to play the game you're in. And on top of it, does she appeal to the base even when a lot of those people view her as some grifter? Now, I think she'd be really good in the cabinet. Secretary of State should have been Trump's Secretary of State when he was considering her, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think she's going to be the VP. We'll see. Olivia Williams says, you worried about Terry taking votes away from Trump? Who's Terry? I don't know who Terry is. Manny says, Lichtman says he is undefeated because he thinks the 2000 election was redacted. What a hypocrite. Even Michael Moore is more right than Lichtman. Well, the reason why they think that is because the Supreme Court would not let Florida keep counting until they got the result they wanted. I mean, that's all it came down to. These people are the biggest election deniers in the country. They've always been. They've contested every single election that they've lost, going all the way back into the 1980s. Every single election, they made a big, ordeal about it, threw a temper tantrum, but because Republicans raised concerns about 2020, then they're kind of, they make it the biggest thing in the world. This is the threat to democracy, whatever. It's about power is what it's about. It's not about principle. They don't have principles. They've never had principles. And we know that. And it's ironic that all these neocons claim they're going to support the Democrats because of principles. What principle do these people have? Because everything you get mad at Trump about, these people do it on a higher level. It's all about power. It's what they're trying to do, is control the narrative. Up next, we have Johnny Hartdog saying, if the keys are right, if you have the keys, you're likely to win. The problem is his interpretation of the keys is wrong. Biden only has one of the keys. Well, if you use his criteria, he has more than one. But still, it is true they're a general guide. If you want to say the economy being good will give a candidate the victory versus it would cause them to lose. The economy, in the eyes of the American people, regardless of whatever gassed up metric you want to use, is not a good economy. It's not an economy that's in a really good position for a lot of people, and they don't see the economy that way. They just don't. Up next, we have we have Eric Kirk. Eric Kirk says, let me see, I lost it here. Biden and his DOJ and other political allies keep pushing lawfare on Trump. They're just guaranteeing Trump becomes a martyr. True Citrus Peppercorn says any more primaries were uncommitteds on the ballot. I think there might be a few. We'll see. At least they'll have some equivalent for it, or they'll do write-ins like they did in Pennsylvania. Alex RK says, make a few jokes about Biden. I need a laugh. I don't have any jokes off the top of my head. Just look at his administration. That basically is a joke himself. I mean, go watch every little clip of him that's gone viral. The memes write themselves. You don't have to write jokes about Biden. Biden is basically a living, breathing joke, which is the main problem with him. Arwatinsky says, you may disagree, but I'm not big on Carrie Lake running for Senate. Have a bad feeling with her. Also, I think young black men are trending right. Well, we knew the last part already. It's not like it's a big share of the electorate or that they're moving right at the rate that they would need to be moving right to make a significant electoral impact. But in terms of Lake, I mean, people in general, I get why she's polarizing. You know, some people think she has an abrasive personality, which again, if she's running up against Ruben Gallego, though, can that not be a positive? Because it's different if you're running against like another woman, but if you're running up against like a man who's a very feminine man, Ruben Gallego, and you're basically going to be the alpha dog, you're going to emasculate him. That, if anything, do you think that's going to make people really sympathize with Gallego? I really don't believe it will. We'll have to see. I mean, she's down in the polls. She can win. I wouldn't say she's the favorite right now, but I mean, favorites change all the time. It's not like it's over. It's going to be a horse race. I can't see her underperforming Trump by more than, 2 to 3 points. If Trump is winning by what the polls show right now, then she'd probably be the favorite. Personally, I think that Trump isn't going to win Arizona by 4. He might win it by like 1 to 2. He'll go from there. And it's going to be more than enough, probably. But we'll see. We'll see if she's able to be pulled over or not. There's a long way to go. Merck IWNL says, Rep. Okay, we're not going to read that one because that just is a bunch of nonsense. Johnny Hartdog for $20 says, Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, and the like are not far-left Democrats. They're generic Democrats. Joe Manchin is a moderate Democrat. People need to stop referring to Biden as a far-left Democrat. He's a generic, typical Democrat. Well, his policy in general, is, at least socially, is very far left. He's not a moderate. That's the other thing. People call him a moderate. I've heard some Democrats will think he's a blue dog Democrat, which is the biggest joke in the world, because he happens to, I don't know, not support a socialized healthcare system. That's the bar that these people have. Like, you could say that economically he's, left-wing, maybe not far left. Socially, I would say he's far left. I don't think you could disagree with that. The difference is he might try to sugarcoat it with optics, but even then, with the whole border thing, I don't think you could look at that and say that this is not some sort of far-left policy. Maybe relatively speaking, he's not far left because he used the word illegal and apologized for it instead of not using it at all. But yeah, I can't exactly say that Biden is some generic, or that the generic Democrats are not far to the left. He's not a progressive in the left-wing term of progressive, but he's also in many ways not a moderate, or even I would say the Democrats that are quote-unquote generic are not moderate anymore. Maybe they were in the 1990s, even if they weren't relatively, but they've gone off a cliff since then, which is why they've lost a great deal of support. Let's see. Malarkey for $50. So far, the biggest super chat of the night is from Malarkey saying, keep up the goodies work, Red. I don't know if that's a typo or not, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Ethan and Braden Productions says, here the George Wallace Party nominated RFK Jr. Well, that's just because they're called the American Independent Party, and in many cases, RFK Jr. to get on ballots is trying to align with a party that already has a decent amount of pull. I could see why he's doing it. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal that he's on that particular party. It's not like it's going to move the needle one way or another. Logan Agee says, shout out for Gen Z conservative Logan AG. I think that's the pronunciation. Well, shout out. Thank you for the super chat. Milky Way Gaming says, is Biden's State of the Union bump over? Will he get a DNC bounce? I don't think he really got a State of the Union bounce. The State of the Union was probably the worst, most divisive State of the Union that I think I've ever seen. If he got a bounce, it was because he got Democrats on board because of it, not because he's winning independents because of it, which is his real problem. So, I don't know. Could he get a DNC bounce? Maybe. I mean, if he gets one, Trump likely gets an RNC bounce to kind of, I guess you would say, balance it out. He might, but did he get one last time? Are people paying attention to the DNC? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But Citrus Peppercorn says it looks like we'll be having an underwhelming libertarian candidate and a strong green. If Stein was on the ballot instead of Hawkins, Trump would have won. I agree. Probably. Base Cat with a member chat. Member for 44 months, by the way. That's a long time. Says 2024 is red-pilled Cenk to the point where people are calling him a right-winger because of how much he's dooming over geriatric Joe. Yeah, I mean, at least he's holding to his word for now, which he's done that before. He said, oh, well, Biden is like the worst guy ever. He's just as bad as Trump. He always falls in line. It's the way that things work. Now, has he been more fair? Maybe. Is he like becoming base? No. But it does show that Democrats are even losing their own constituencies based off of the fact that people like Cenk and a lot of their support is a lot weaker now than it was for Biden 4 years ago. And the Trump hatred fatigue is also a real thing. So there's that. Merck IWNL says polls recently show RFK's taking from Biden. I think he's getting the moderate old school Dems who don't like the wokeness. Maybe. I think that a lot of his voters are not voting for him based off of ideological lines. Just like Gary Johnson's voters didn't want to all get rid of driver's licenses. I think it just came from the fact that they supported a candidate because of the fact that, you know, they don't want to vote for the main options. They don't like either candidate. He's the protest vote. That's kind of what it comes down to. But there's not a single reason that any Republican or Trump supporter or Trump voter in 2020 should vote for RFK Jr. because he's not in line with the agenda. He's very much a crazy environmentalist, far left on many fronts, and a lot of his newfound, like, oh, I'm going to talk like I'm part of the center right. It's all a grift for votes, and it could be detrimental if we don't try to neutralize it. And Trump has tried, and maybe that explains the polling, why he started to lose some ground. Who knows? Who knows? Alex RX says, or RK says, Harry Sisson thinks Biden is perfectly fit and Trump is fat and not fit, is the biggest lolcow on Twitter today. Liberals a lot less in numbers now. Well, he's a paid shill. I mean, there's no other way to really analyze it. I don't really care or get outraged when I see these people have their bad takes because they're just paid Democrat shills. He's literally proven to be paid to boost Biden. This is not some conspiracy. He's literally admitted it. And again, there's nothing of note or of value that he says. It's all nonsense. It's all debunked lies. They repeat the same things and they get paid. You know, if you get paid thousands of dollars to tweet and astroturf something that's not going to move the needle, first of all, it's a waste of money. We should encourage it. But for two, it's like, yeah, if you were in that situation that he was in, yeah, I would also tweet nonsense if I was looking to get paid that much money and I didn't have any income and I'm like a college student who's barely getting by, which is not the case. But, you know, back then, you know, I wouldn't sell out my own values, but I mean, there's a lot of people I know who probably just don't care much about politics that would. So there's that. Joshua Mills for $50. He has outdone the previous super chat by 1 cent. And he says, I have a few Democrat coworkers and their complacency is off the chart. I repeatedly remind them voter perception of the economy is currently in the pits, yet they're still blind to the facts. Oh, well, their complacency will help us win. Yeah, I mean, they're more complacent than they were. You go back all the way to 2016. It's like reaching those levels. I'm not complacent at all. I'm kind of nervous, but not like in a doomer way. But you look at these people and how complacent they are. It's insane. They're just pretending like, oh, well, the polls are going to be completely wrong and Biden's going to coast by and Biden's going to win. It's like, where are they pulling this from? It's out of thin air, just like the whole interpretation of the 13 keys. And because they operate in an ecosystem with a lot of other Democrats who are probably, only talking about abortion because it's their cope, because that's the only issue that they think they can win on. It's not how a lot of independents view a Trump v. Biden matchup. Maybe that's how they viewed a Dixon v. Whitmer or a Mastriano v. Shapiro, but a Biden v. Trump matchup is not really going to have much to do with abortion. And if it is, it's not a cakewalk for Biden, the way that some people think. 4Damage says, hey, Rep, I'm from New York's First. What do you think of Nick Lalotta? I don't like him as much after the recent Ukraine funding bill. Well, a lot of those guys are rhinos. I mean, they're holding the majority down, but they're part of the reason why the majority can't do anything, because you have a narrow majority, and that majority entirely consists of rhinos, which is a huge problem. Actually, the majority narrowed tonight with the results out of New York's 26th, which was expected. We expected the Democrats to win that heavily, and they won it heavily. I'm sure some people are going to say this means Trump is over and he's going to lose ground because 60,000 people turned out, voted 2-1 for the Dem. It doesn't mean much, definitely not as much as they think it does, but let them have it, whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's it. So that's it for Super Chats. We've done this for an hour. We can look at regular chat. We can go another 10, possibly 15 minutes, go from there. But we don't really have a lot to touch base on, so it's the waning hour of the stream. Make sure you guys, if you have any questions, send them via Super Chat. It's the end of the month. Get your last final Super Chats of the month in right now. Now's the time to do it. So far, Joshua Mills is the man to beat with his 50. I don't know if we're going to get any above that, but who knows? Talk Christy Noam. I did last stream. I mean, she's done. There's no way you can sit back here and try to say that, oh, it was out of context. I don't care. You're in politics. You know how these things work, especially being in right-wing politics. You know how the media works. You basically go out there and write on your own admission, I shot my dog who was 14 months old because I hated that dog. That is not something that's going to make you look good. That means you're just a dumbass, and that's what she is. She's not very politically skilled unless she's trying to ruin and torpedo her own career, possibly to cover up for something else, which I don't even know how that would work, because I feel like if she's trying to cover up for something else, then, maybe there'd be more interest in that scandal, but maybe she is being blackmailed. I don't know, but she's not going to be VP, which is good, because I don't want her to be VP. But yeah, let her destroy her own career. Who knows why she's doing it, but she's destroying it. You could say, oh, it's just farm stuff. It doesn't matter. You're bragging about killing a 14-year-old or a 14-month-old dog, saying that you hate that dog. It doesn't matter if it's not like the dog attacked you and you were doing it in self-defense and it's a tragedy, which even then, why would you write about that? You know how it can be interpreted. There's no justification for it. You're basically the Michael Vick of Republican politics. You know, at least he was trying to keep his dog stuff a secret. He wasn't trying to tell the entire world about his scandal. So, Base Cat says, you see on X the other day when leftoids rage quit Axios because they exposed Joe being surrounded by his aides to hide his incompetence. Well, of course, they're upset because people are being objective. CNN fact checks Biden now. It doesn't mean that they're biased or their biases are against him, but because they even can't, for whatever sake of their own view of integrity, they even can't ignore what's going on. Yeah, they don't like Trump. Yeah, they're biased. But even they have to fact check him because he's just that insane. Because maybe it's to draw in more clicks, I don't know, but he gets fact check every single event now, just like they used to do with Trump. And you know for a fact that they're not going to be stretching the fact checks against Biden the way they stretch them against Trump. So there's that. LinRx52 for $50 says, sent my first big soon to the RNC after not supporting for the past several years. Here's a prayer. They're going to get the ground game going. So true. And they've got the money to do it. They're putting poll watchers, but then they need to get the ballot chasing system because that's the final thing they need to secure this election victory. But even then, we can't be complacent. You never know what can happen. We got to get out and vote. It's going to be a winnable race. It should be a more, I guess you would say, conventional election than 2020 in terms of how it operates. But I mean, still, we can't like take our foot off the gas. We can't take our foot off the gas whatsoever. So we got 700 people watching. Hit that like button. Let's get to 500 likes on the stream. We'll see what the chat is saying. They're talking about Zeldin for VP. Would not be a bad choice. Somebody asked if he ever held elected office. He was in Congress for quite some time. So there's that. But there's a lot going on. We got 6 months. 6 months to go. May 1st is tomorrow. May 1st is actually in an hour. If you're on the East Coast, it'll be in an hour. So there's that. But May 1st is on the horizon. We know what's about to go down. Prediction's going to be dropped tomorrow. Senate prediction probably the next day. And we have a lot of ground to cover. We have a lot of things to do. We have 6 months. This is the time. I mean, this is the election. This is how it's decided. It is true. Democrats will be right when they say kind of ignore the polls between now and the convention. I kind of agree that a lot of it is noise, but still the fact that Trump is the favorite, he's never been the favorite before. So it should tell you a lot about the state of the race. Trump is the favorite still, and we'll see what happens after the conventions, but I'm pretty sure that Republicans are going to gain so long as there's not some miracles happening. Biden would have to get his brain back and then, do a lot of things, and even then it may not be enough. So we'll see. Because on the merits of the argument, we've won. In terms of turnout, that's a whole nother story, but turnout's going to drop from 2020. Biden probably has lost more support because his coalition is more unstable. What demographic voted for Trump twice and then is saying, I'm out? People that were super upset about 1-6? It's not showing in the polling. I mean, let's be real here. Polls show that only like 2 or 3% of Trump 2020 voters are dropping off or supporting Biden. Who knows if they even all do at the end of the day. But you look at Biden's support, he's only at like 87, 90% of his supporters in 2020. So it's like he's losing a lot of ground, kind of like how Obama lost a lot of ground. The only difference is 2008 was kind of a landslide, whereas 2020 was like the most razor-thin election since 2000. So you do the math, at least in terms of the raw votes in the states that mattered. Thomas Willingham says, who's worse, Howard Stern or you mean Mike Johnson? I mean, you're comparing somebody who's a liberal radio host to somebody who is the rhino acting Speaker of the House in a way. He's acted like a rhino. Who knows why he's doing it? Maybe there is some blackmail. I don't know. But either way, I don't think you can compare the two. I know it's a cop-out, but what can I say? Merc IWNL says Tulsi's a good choice because she can expose the insanity of the current regime like she's done on PBD's podcast and maybe get moderates on board with her and Trump. Well, we'll see. The moderates or center-left, at least online, doesn't like her. Now, it is true, online doesn't translate to real life. Some people will say, oh, she's a grifter, this, that, and the other thing. I don't know how it would pan out. Like I said, it's a wild card. It could maybe give him a big boost, or maybe it could sink him. And I don't want to take risks right now. I want somebody to be Trump's VP who, A, is going to help him get elected, and B, is not going to stab him in the back. I'm not even worried about Tulsi's loyalty. I mean, personally, they say she's grifting now. Who's to say she wasn't grifting then? She was a conservative in the early 2000s. Her dad was a Republican, but to get elected in Hawaii, she veered off to the left. And at least in terms of social issues. Economically, yeah, she's probably still liberal. Personally, I don't care what the economic position of the VP usually is. The VP is an irrelevant position. But I do think socially that, yeah, I mean, she maybe has, on the Second Amendment, evolved. If you look at her even last 2 years in Congress, she was She was much, or at least her last year in Congress, she was much better. The only Democrat not to impeach Trump. She was or I think Colin Peterson was the other one. But she was also even when it came down to the whole transgender stuff, she stood against the Democrats, stood with the Republicans on big tech, foreign policy. So it's a mixed bag. I personally don't think it's the worst pick, but I think that it's a wild card pick. I think there are better picks. That's where we got to go from. Sam Madsen says, who are the 4% of Trump voters who say they're dropping off, as well as the 8% of Biden voters? Probably holdover neocons. I mean, some people that are in that camp probably still vote for Trump, and maybe some in the Biden camp as well, but people that just don't like the economy, people that regret their vote. A lot of people in Texas regret their vote. I mean, it's the way things are. COVID and BLM and a lot of things were rampant in 2020. Our narratives have been proven correct on all of those. Meanwhile, it's not like there's any new narratives or issues that are boosting Democrats other than maybe abortion, which is probably not going to help them enough to compensate for the other issues that are helping out Republicans right now. Cool Blue 71 says, do you think Trump's VP selection considers age? Yes, and that's why I've heard hearsay, maybe it's not true, but Ben Carson's not going to be chosen because he's too old, they believe, and doesn't really provide contrast. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not, because I see people in chat talking about Carson, and it kind of resonated with the super chat in terms of the answer there. Also, shout out to Daniel Bidlack for the 2. Shout out to Daniel. But anyways, guys, like up the stream. Let's get to 500 likes. Make sure you guys are subscribed. Make sure you guys have hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you hit all notifications so you don't miss another stream. You don't miss another video. You don't get these selective YouTube notifications. Base Cat says, you see all the shitlib student protesters getting pepper sprayed at UT Austin. Most of them are just there to support the current thing. Well, would you say that when you say shitlibs, usually the people that are like on the far left, you wouldn't use that terminology to refer to like the Palestine people. It's more like the neoliberals that are probably a little bit more on the fence, or at least in many cases pro-Israel. But yeah, I think a lot of these people are ironically enough, they're just they're getting face down on the system. The system doesn't really, I guess you would say, come down on certain people on the left usually, but when it comes down to certain issues where, I guess you would say, like in Texas, Republicans, always, at least politicians, very pro-Israel, would make sense why Abbott's trying to put down the protests. And in turn, what it's doing is it's making them more mad, but they're not even going to get mad at Abbott and like blame Trump by proxy. They're getting mad at Biden, which is the funny thing about it. No matter what happens, it doesn't make Biden look good. There's nothing you can do. The only thing I will say is don't underestimate the guy before his debates, before his speeches, even though he usually makes a fool out of himself. You know, they'll drug him up. He'll speak somewhat coherently, and they'll say it's a win for him, despite the fact that he like freezes up and pauses, every little second. Even if you compare him to 2020, 2020 in the debate, yeah, I don't think that he won the way the media said he did. I do think Trump left a lot on the table by not, letting Biden trip over himself like he realized for the second debate. But still, Biden was somewhat more coherent. Now, that's not the case anymore. Now he's really in shambles, and it's really going to kind of be a struggle, because he would go off on these wacky tangents talking about, kids rubbing his legs up and down, and talking about how he was like a lifeguard or whatever, and he liked kids jumping on his lap. Weird stuff, obviously. But when he was saying it, he sounded a little bit like, I guess you would say, not as old as he sounds now. It's just like he's muttering. When he talks, it sounds like he's more lethargic than he already was. That's not a good thing. And yeah, Trump doesn't sound the same way he did when he was in his 60s. I mean, we know that. But has Trump lost a step in the way he talked since 2020? I think it's about the same. I mean, if anything, it's better if Trump kind of tones down a little bit, because it makes him appear more presidential, which was a big critique a lot of people had. But he still has the wit that the base likes, and his policy is back to where it was in 2016. which is good. You know, the narrative shifting from Trump doesn't care about his original agenda. Now it's, oh, Trump didn't enact it the first time, which again, that has basically gone out the window because the primaries are over. So let's see. Merkeye WNL says, I'd love to see LTE or some other left-wing electoral pull up rep stream numbers. They are boring and out of touch. Rep is the Tom Brady of elections. I agree. I mean, to be fair, I'm not the one conducting the elections. I'm more like the announcer. I'm the analyst. I'm probably, I'd say, a lot of people say that it's better than watching Fox, better than watching all these other networks, even on the right, because unlike a lot of people at even major networks, I think I have a better grasp of voting patterns and things like that. And I think it's a good state-of-the-art presentation every time there's an election night, even if it's a primary, no matter what it is. That's the way it is. I mean, when it comes down to elections, I don't really see any other people pulling in big numbers because, I mean, who wants to even watch them, even if they click on their videos sometimes? There's no left-wing equivalent. But again, they have their major networks, and we don't have major networks. So they're going to, well, we have Fox, but they're not really all on our side to begin with. And, you know, there's these other minor networks, but they don't really have the intellectual depth specifically on elections to cover them the way that they deserve to be covered. So there's that. Now, it's going to be a fun stream regardless, but we have to make sure that the ending of the stream is more fun than the beginning of the stream instead of vice versa, because that's kind of been a problem lately outside of some of these primaries. You know, we want it to be fun. We want it to dunk. We want to dunk on the left. We can enjoy the salt instead of having them try to claim that we have salt, which, I mean, to an extent may have been true to a certain extent, but they always like to exaggerate. You know, it's how they operate. They'll say you're crying if it's like you're disappointed, like this is upsetting, whatever. It's objective analysis. It's not emotional analysis, but they're emotional people, so they're projecting. The only time I think I've even come close to tearing up on the stream was 2020 Trump's State of the Union address when he was giving out the Presidential Medal of Freedom, because that was just heartwarming and touching. But even then, it wasn't like there were tears, especially not an election night. It was just more like disappointment, a little bit of subtle anger, but maybe you could say irritation. But we don't want irritation even. We want to brag. We want to be happy. We want to gloat, but not really lose sight of the importance of undoing what's been done under this administration, because that's the problem. But think about it. What's more impressive? Trump winning in 2016 in retrospect, when the odds were stacked against him, it looked like, in many people's eyes, maybe not mine, but many people's eyes, it looked like he was not going to win. Or now, because he's been through this, and Republicans have struggled in elections not named Trump, and even though he's still like the favorite in the polls, but he's also on trial being indicted. Which is more impressive? This is the kicker. Which is more impressive? We could put a poll out. Which is more impressive? Trump's 2016 win, or if Trump wins in 2024? Keep in mind, he's older now. Now, you could sit back here and make a case for either one. You could say, well, he's already the favorite. Biden's not that popular. Well, Hillary wasn't that popular either. So we're seeing what people are saying. Now they're saying it's more impressive if he wins. I think people are just tired of being disappointed and let down. That's what they're tired of. And so far, Trump is leading the poll. Now he's at 7, or Trump 2024 is at 72. I don't think that would have been the same in 2020. Maybe it would have still won because of recency bias or whatever, but I don't think so. Maybe like on the last day when the polls showed Biden winning by like close to 10, but still. Let's see. Ben R says Connor from Lotus Eaters. I don't know what that is, but said Marco Rubio is the VP. Thoughts on that one? It's possible. I heard that he's in the running. I heard it was Vance or Rubio. But again, these are sources that might not know what they're talking about. Yes, they're close to Trump, but we've had conflicting reports that were very close to Trump. But Rubio said he'd do it. He said it would be an honor. He'd probably have to move, or Trump would have to move, or whatever. But I don't know. We'll see. Daniel Bidlack says it matters way less who the VP is. The focus needs to be on the 4,000 senior positions in the executive branch. Hashtag Heritage Foundation Project 2025. It's true. Now, technically, Trump doesn't really have much to do with Project 2025. It's a Heritage Foundation plan to hire bureaucrats under any Republican administration. Democrats are scared to death about it because they know that it'd be a real plan to drain the swamp, but Biden can't really campaign on it because then he just seems like a crazy person, and Trump can just say he has nothing to do with these people. So, like, I don't know exactly where, this is going to doom Trump thing is really coming from. Project 2025, it's one of these projects. There's multiple. There's also Project 47. There's plenty of projects, but what I will say is, yeah, you have to drain the swamp and get rid of the bureaucrats that are in the swamp that are causing the swamp to hold up, because it's not just one person or two people at the top. It's a big problem. The roots, you got the tree, you got branches. Cutting off a branch is not going to stop the tree from necessarily growing. You have to get it by its roots, and that's where the swamp really is. So got to get your hands a little dirty, even if it means hiring bureaucrats to replace the old ones, just to reverse some of these trends. But let's see. Base Cat says, who's your favorite leftoid to dunk on? I can't exactly tell you because I just don't know. It depends on the given time, given era. It used to be Cenk, but Cenk is actually not saying all of the wrong things, surprisingly. Not saying that he's saying the right things, but he hasn't been as much of a lol cow as recently compared to how he was, 4 or 5 years ago. Not saying that he's not a lol cow. He still is, but I don't know. Cenk is up there, but he's not number one anymore. So I don't know. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of people to dunk on. I don't exactly know. You'd have to give me a list of people that are just clowns that are relevant, because there's a lot of people that aren't that relevant, but like dunking on them is always fun. Like the election mafia, election Twitter type of people. Hassan, I don't really pay attention to some of these people, at least not as much anymore. But Hassan, he is a lol cow, yeah, I'd say. People say Vaush is fun to dunk on. Well, he kind of dunked on himself by opening up his image drawer. It did not end well for him, and people defending him for that are the biggest lol cows of all, because there's just no defense for what was in there. So AOC hasn't really done much lately. They basically put a muzzle on her because they realized that it wasn't exactly making them look particularly bad or particularly good to have her just run her mouth about everything, because she's insane. And Republicans highlighted it, and honestly, they should do the same thing. Republicans should do the same thing with MTG, because she's all bark, no bite, and at this point, she's shilled for the establishment at the most inopportune times, and she says the dumbest things. It's not enough to justify what positive she brings to the table policy-wise, because I'm not so sure she brings much policy-wise to the table that's helping out the brand, because I can't say that she exactly is. Now, some people might disagree. Maybe they're not paying attention as much as I, and that's okay too. But let's see. Josh Light for 10 says, Rep, any thoughts on the Gateway Pundit story on mysterious voter registration surges in Texas, 1.4 million since 2020? That's fake. It's all fake. I mean, Tim Pool reported on it. Gateway Pundit reported on it. It's not real. They also showed the same thing in Arizona. The difference is, if you actually look at the real numbers on the Secretary of State website, you're not seeing a notable surge. And in fact, Republicans are gaining in Texas or Arizona. But there hasn't been a million in like 1 week in Texas. It's just not entirely true. Now, Texas has voter ID, which is good. Most people vote in person, even if they vote early in Texas, which is good. It's looking to be a very easy win for Trump in Texas. I'm not particularly worried about it. So we missed a super chat from Philip Garcia saying, the fact of the matter is we're sick of losing election season after season. This party is nothing without Trump. Yeah, so you get Kristi Noem up there shooting her dog and talking about how much she hates her dog and doing advertisements for, what's it called? Plastic surgeons and dentists in states she doesn't live in. It's weird. And you got Ron DeSantis wearing his heels everywhere, basically talking very robotically, and then having people defend him that are not really all that likable. I'm very glad that we nominated Trump, because the alternative would probably have led to a loss. I just have to say it. Someone in chat asked if I'm drinking straight gin. Well, if I was drinking straight gin this entire stream, I think that I'd be A, noticeably drunk, or B, dead by now, because gin is gin. I don't think I'd be able to drink that much gin all at once and still stay relatively coherent. But who knows? Still more coherent than whoever's in the White House right now. Let's see. MTG was iconic against the Ukraine bill. Well, she wanted to remove Johnson, which I understand the sentiment, but she didn't want to remove McCarthy, who did the same thing how many times? So you're looking at that. It showcases that she's got personal vendettas, for one, and she's just completely sold out to Kevin McCarthy. You can't do that. You can't do that. And that's a problem. And when even like the State of the Union thing, which is technically a positive, trying to draw attention to the whole Laken Riley case, get Biden to trip over his words, make him apologize to the killer, say people like him built the country. Fine. I understand why she would do that, but the way she did it, kind of, I think for some people came off a little bit uncouth. And that's not something that you really are trying to do when you're trying to draw attention to something like that. And that's kind of the thing that I've noticed about her, is that, at least she was talking, for her first 2 years, about policy and trying, she was loud, but you can be a fighter if you back it up policy wise. It's worth it, because you're actually moving the Overton window. But then if you're just going to sit up there and posture and be ideologically incoherent, sell out to the establishment, you're representing everything wrong with a good portion of the Republican Party, not representing something that's right about it, which is a problem. Who knows what went on between her and Kevin McCarthy? People can read between the lines. We've heard rumors. I'm not saying they're true. I'm not saying they're not true. But M for $2 says, you think we'll see a rhino exodus if Trump wins? Well, if they're gonna leave if Trump wins, I think that they're already not with the Republican Party. They're not voting for Trump. If you're talking about from Congress, that's a different story. Maybe some of these rhinos might retire. Democrats might pick up some seats in the midterms. That's how midterms work. It's not going to be a bloodbath like 2018. They know they hate that term now, despite it being a common term to use. It's funny, I just said it. I just said the term normally without even thinking. And apparently I am inciting something according to their own deranged, demented logic. Funky Cold Belina says, what do you think are the chances that Tucker is VP? 0.0. I don't think he wants it. I don't think Trump would want to take a risk. Tucker has said some more controversial things lately. Not saying he's wrong about all of them. I'm just saying that I don't think that Trump is going to take that gamble. Tucker's more of a potential top of the ticket guy if he wanted to be, but I'm not even sure he wants to have that role. I think he just wants to be this guy who stands, pushes the envelope, does his own independent thing. He obviously is very upset with what happened at Fox, as he should be. So let him do his thing, like Tucker, but he's not going to be VP. He's not going to, no chance, no shot. Let's see. Sam Madsen says, what do you think will make 2026 better than 2018? Possibly, I'm just saying the magnitude is not going to be as big. Democrats probably do retake the House, assuming Trump and the Republicans are going to have it. They're probably going to retake it. But is it going to be by are they going to gain 50 or 40 seats even in the House? No, we're too polarized. They might gain like 20. And the Senate, they might not even retake the Senate. So, in fact, they probably don't if I had to hedge my bets in terms of retaking the Senate. But in terms of the House, yeah, they probably get the House. And also, you talk about these governorships, they're becoming open seats again, which means that if Republicans can find some strong candidates, and in many cases that might mean people that are not fully in tune with the base, people that at least can perform well electorally, then you're going to have, down ballot effects that are more positive as well. That kicks in. I would predict Democrats to take the House, but in terms of governorships, Republicans probably gain Kansas. They probably, gain, or at least maybe they'll hold New Hampshire, assuming that they keep it this fall. I think they will, just because of the state level impact versus the national impact. And on top of that, there's some other races that are winnable. I mean, Wisconsin's winnable. Probably Evers might retire. Michigan, it's a little iffy, but it could be close race depending on who the Republicans run. And Pennsylvania, that's Shapiro's not going to lose. We know that, but who knows what's going to happen? I think we could see a few surprises in that department, is what I'm saying. I don't think you're going to see like a flip in like a New Mexico or an Oregon, but I think you could see potentially, closer races in the Midwest and certain places where Republicans fell short in, like Kansas. I think they flip that. They probably get Kentucky back as well in 2027. So there's that. So I think that's it for Super Chats. Make sure you guys like the stream. We're probably going to end it. We went on for about 20 minutes longer than I thought we would. But yeah, we've hit the end of the month. It was another successful month for the channel. It was another successful month for the movement. And hopefully by November, we're going to put together a winning streak for the movement. And we're going to put Donald Trump back in the White House where he belongs, and Biden in the basement where he belongs, possibly on house arrest. Who knows? Probably not, because Republican DAs won't fight back. But if they were honest and applied everything fairly, they would. They would. Dova Budget 100, possibly with the final Super Chat of the night, says, I want Shapiro out now. Well, I do too, but I'm just saying I wouldn't bet on it. The guy's up by 15 on his net favorables right now. Obviously, things can change. You look at 2014's governor's race in Pennsylvania. That was in a red wave year. Democrats flipped it. You never know. So anything can happen. It just depends on what scandal comes up. There's so many things, and who knows if, hopefully we are not in another Biden midterm, but possibly would go better for Republicans if it was, but it's not worth it, obviously, and that we know. So let's see. I think that's it. I think we're going to end the stream right here, right now. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you guys like the stream before you go. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Hit the bell for notifications so you never miss any other content. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.